Hi, it's Sandy Shellis from Environmental Coffee House, and I did not plan this, but I read an article that I liked, and I also have a couple of announcements, so I decided to do this on Facebook, as I've been going back and forth with YouTube and Facebook, and I thought, well, let's go for this. Because it was in Atlantic, brings up a couple of things that I thought we would talk about, and it kind of segues into my guest on Sunday night, Tim Canova, who is running for Congress in the 23rd District in Florida against Debbie Wasserman Schultz as an independent, and he's dealing with all of the horrific things that are going on down there. So let's start this article, and then we can have a little chit-chat about it. It's in the Atlantic, and it's called "The Victims of Climate Change Are Already Here." Us. With the new global summit approaching, communities in the southern United States are calling attention to the disaster scenarios they currently face. In the new global reality where each passing year is the hottest on record, the final month of summer foretells calamity. It's always hot and volatile in the dog days between mid-August and mid-September. But the past few years have dialed those elements up high. Heat waves, droughts, storms, floods, and other extreme events have garnered increasing attention. The largest wildfire in California's history is now raging almost a year after the previous record holder hit the state. I mean, we know all these things. Hello, everybody. Hi, Marcella. Hi, Lynn. There's a lot of you joining me. But we know all these things because if you follow Environmental Coffee House, of course, we post them all. But this was an interesting one. And they talk about Hurricanes Harvey and Irma ravaged the Gulf Coast and Florida in late August last year. Hurricane Maria became the second most deadly natural disaster in contemporary American history when it passed over Puerto Rico last September. And the 13th anniversary of the Louisiana landfall of Hurricane Katrina, the largest such storm, is on August 29th. Climate change is not a future problem. Climate change is a current problem. Don't we all know that? Yet the United States, despite this recent history, has pulled back from a number of already insufficient commitments to reversing emissions and global warming. Faced with this vacuum, American non-governmental organizations and states have stepped forward with campaigns designed to reinvigorate climate activism and policymaking. But they have a long way to go, especially in connecting a mainstream climate movement with the majority of the victims of those disasters. One of the major initiatives put together as President Donald Trump began to withdraw the White House from climate leadership is the Global Climate Action Summit, which will take place in September. I wish I could be there. It's in San Francisco, but it's something that was requested several years ago by the United Nations. Says Nick Nuttall, the summit spokesman. A collective of non-state actors organized the event, Nuttall said, with the goal of bringing together leaders from state and local governments, businesses, and citizens from around the world to demonstrate how the tide has turned in the race against climate change. And haven't we seen that in the last couple of weeks? It went from nothing when I started this, we never saw a thing in the mainstream media, to now on the cover of the Buffalo News, where the city had an article on the heat, front page on a Friday night. So we are well within where we're going, unfortunately. So, as Nuttall told me, the author, the general idea is to recapture the energy that preceded the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement, in which most of the world's countries agreed to pursue policies that would curb global temperature growth to well under 2 degrees Celsius. And if you ask most of my friends that follow me on a lot of places, YouTube, it's not going to happen. We're going over. We're going over. We have done nothing collectively to stop the trajectory we're on. We really haven't. So why the wildfires of 2018 have been so ferocious? However, the problem with many climate summits and much of the mainstream climate movement generally is that many of them focus on a future target, planning for and attempting to avert doomsday scenarios that might play out over the course of decades or a century. The mainstream paradigm often views climate change as a collective risk and pushes people to action by selling fears of future societal collapse and environmental ruin. Both can be averted if politicians and people work together with urgency. The common argument goes, if we all sing, "Kumbaya, my love," my friends, right? Well, as fallout from Harvey, Irma, and Maria shows, though, that argument is false. The suffering caused by warming and more temperamental environment is already happening. We know this, and it isn't distributed equally, nor will it be. From the poor people in Vieques, Puerto Rico, who still face uncertain medical care and unstable electricity after Maria, to Black and Latino communities severed from dialysis services in Houston during Harvey, if there's anything the current climate regime tells us, it's the vulnerable populations that are already in trouble. But as the anniversaries of America's most infamous climate disasters come around, once again, there are real efforts by a loose network of veteran environmental justice leaders and groups across the country to spread the gospel of climate justice in this moment of crisis. More than a dozen local environmental groups from coast to coast have organized the Freedom to Breathe Tour, where journalists, activists, and environmental justice experts will present vulnerable communities with their case for swift and dramatic action on climate change right on. This is what I've been saying. These are the communities that need to understand and learn. The 21-day tour, which begins August 25th and will traverse the entirety of the American South and Southwest, will illustrate the current climate realities for communities of color in the nation's most marginalized places. Yes. I don't believe the science is inaccessible, says Caroline Lewis, the founder of the Clio Institute, a nonprofit organization focused on climate literacy and education in South Florida. What we're trying to do is simplify climate scientists for the general population. During the tour stop in Miami, Lewis and her organization will run a workshop that uses well-known concepts like sea level rise and gentrification as what she called gateway drugs to a full understanding of climate change. It's about time. It's about time. In and around Miami, especially, those costs are readily apparent. The city is facing the imminent threats of inundation, as well as the potential for climate-based gentrification, in which wealthier and typically whiter residents scramble for the few patches of high ground. The rising heat creates health problems too, especially in the many poorer communities that rely on window units and fans for air conditioning. Florida is expected to have several cities face more than 100 days of dangerous heat indices by 2050. And Miami's cocktail of humidity and heat is on the verge of creating real danger. We are one bad summer away from reading about heat fatalities in Miami, Lewis told me. And what did we have? Heat fatalities in Canada this year, in Montreal. Communities and activists see the road trip along the 3,000 miles between Miami and San Francisco as an opportunity to showcase ongoing disasters ahead of next year's UN climate meeting. In Lake Apopka, Florida, members of the Farm Worker Association of Florida are mobilizing after a recent study indicated that virtually all Latino populations of farm workers in the area faces regular heat-related illnesses. And I've been reading about this. And that's in addition to regular exposure to pesticides. In Cancer Alley, a swath of Louisiana between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, residents burdened with higher than average rates of cancer have sought protections against the petrochemical industry that dominates the region. And in New Orleans, 13 years after Hurricane Katrina, black and brown residents still live in a profound environmental insecurity, facing continued displacement, pollution, and flooding. It's just wrong. In Houston, another stop on the tour, both ends of the climate degradation loop are on display. Harvey revealed just how dangerous the petrochemical industry can be, with multiple hazardous waste leaks in vulnerable neighborhoods and explosions in a peroxide production plant near the city. But that danger might have stayed muted if not for the storm, whose intensity was likely amplified by the use of petrochemicals. Can Puerto Rico recover from Maria before the next storm hits, guys? With Harvey in Houston, there's the big picture, says Priscilla Villa, an organizer with the environmental advocacy group Earthworks. Houston is seen as this epicenter for oil and gas. And Cindy Kay just joined us, and she lives in Houston. Hi, Cindy, the epicenter of oil and gas. The industry headquarters are based there. But there's also a lot of industrial facilities that exist, predominantly on the east side near communities of color. Oil and gas extraction and refinement processes are well-known sources of pollution. And the use of oil and gas is well known to drive climate change. According to Villa, the vulnerabilities of communities to the pollution and their vulnerabilities to a changing climate, they're inseparable. Continuing on across desert and mountains into the rich hinterland of California, the communities on tour are increasingly vocal, perhaps even desperate. For them, the points of no return aren't 2 degrees away in the future, but could be reached within a span of a few years. Farm workers in western Texas face the dual pressures of hostile immigration enforcement and hotter and more dangerous working conditions. Who's talking about this? Small minority-owned farms in New Mexico seek a new model to compete in a warming state. Throughout the tour span, displacement is already widespread. Migrant farm workers have already found themselves fleeing heat and droughts and the space and social boundaries of cities that were already built under the constraints of Jim Crow are under distress from natural disasters and heat. So events like the Global Climate Action Summit are kicking off a post-American era of climate leadership with the understanding that if humans wait too long to do something meaningful about the Earth's warming, catastrophe is ahead. But even more sure is that there are plenty of catastrophes brewing in forgotten places today. I liked it because you know what? We all talk about what's happening, but we really don't talk about the people that are being, not enough, that are being marginalized, that are being hurt, that will be hit and maybe don't have enough information. Who is talking to people in these areas that don't have the wherewithal to go to a summit or to even get on the internet and get on a channel like mine? And Antonio's and Nikia's and Jonathan's and Linda's and Mindy and everybody else on the team, Doug and who else? Oh my goodness, I cannot forget. The names of my team members it's such a great team. Brian and Desmond. What a team, right? But are the people that are vulnerable, are they hearing us? Are they hearing us? Is there enough representation for them? I hope that this is a start of something for people in the communities that need to understand. You know, we don't have to scare them, but they're already scared. I mean, how would you feel living in Puerto Rico and not having access to anything that would have really educated you enough? Or even in the deep south or in these poor neighborhoods in any city. These people are thinking about just getting by, just living. And then these climate catastrophes happen. And they're happening. They're coming to a city near you. Australia's in a drought. You know, we've been having we have a nice day today, but we've been having crazy rain. It almost seemed like our weather switched and that I'm living in Portland, Oregon. And they're having a drought. We're supposed to be dry. But the whole main thing for this one was let's get a dialogue about the people that really need to learn. and really need to understand that this is not a joke, and they're going to be impacted, and people need to have the ability to adapt and withstand. And I don't see how, with the degrees in Fahrenheit reaching 112, 120 in farmlands, how these people are going to be able to pick, let alone even just stand in the sun for an amount of time. And Bev says Beto O'Rourke is speaking about it. He's running for Senate in Texas. Good. I've read about him. I guess I have to read some more. I think maybe he would even come on with me. That would be great. So to end this, I'm not going to make it much longer. Tim Canova will be on with me talking about Florida on Sunday night, this Sunday, 9 o'clock Eastern time. And Jolene Fedwick says Truth United. Well, maybe there are more people than I think. Maybe it's because I'm closed up. I'm so isolated from those individuals, those communities. I need to be more open to. And we need voices out all over. So if you can share this for me, that would be great. Maybe I could get Beto O'Rourke. Who knows? It would be great. Thank you for coming. It's Friday night. This is not my regular show, but this was really on my mind. It was pressing me ever since I read the article. Marcia says our cities and, oh, shoot. Let me go back. Let me see. Marcia says, oh, geez, our cities and valley communities in the West have been choked with toxic smoke for weeks and months. Even Seattle and San Francisco have worse air quality than Beijing now. And Steve says, because it's hard for me to do this on the phone. I can't. Lynn says, how do you spread the truth when science is outlawed? Well, you know what? Let's hope this is not for long. I'm not going to go into the the politics that the insane politics of the mobster in chief and the people around him. All I have to say is if there was anybody else, they would have been kicked out. If it was a progressive that was doing the shit that's going on today. But we have the opportunity, guys, and that is to vote in the United States. And that is to make it all better for yourselves in your local area. And if your local area extends to an area where you know that people aren't getting what they need, help, volunteer. Do something to help them. Teach them. Reach one and teach them. Not scare them. Adaptation has to happen. As I always say, we're here till we're not. And there's no date on it. Peace. And you guys have a phenomenal Friday night. Bye.